right, hi everybody, welcome back to our final segment of content for the Rise L training. And this is where we really get into how we're integrating the language and content. We're going to focus on these key language uses. There are 4 for us to really focus on, but we have a few questions to ask ourselves. One is, what is the academic language demand in the standard? Now, keep in mind that we're always going to start with your content standard. So we're not taking anything away. We're just sort of unpacking what's already there and unpacking it with a new lens, that language, academic language demand lens, to take a look at how we can help these students succeed. So the second big question we have underneath the academic language demand is, what is the language expectation that fits best? And there aren't that many choices, and everything's provided for you in the resources. So as we go through this and as you start putting it into practice together, expect to have lots of support getting through these questions. So the language expectation, keep in mind, looks a lot like a language objective. WIDA is reframing it. So you could do either way, but if you want to do it with the language expectations from WIDA, you're going to have quite a lot of language written out for you. You just go straight to a resource and take a look at that. So finally, what language functions and features are essential? Now, this gets down to the nitty-gritty, and sometimes it can be overwhelming. So if we don't get that far in these 5 weeks together for Rise L, then I'm not going to be too upset. Really, honestly, if we can focus on those key language uses and start paying attention to the academic language demand and start paying attention to the scaffolds and differentiation needed to help these English learners be successful in our summer program, I'm going to call that a success. So make sure that we're sort of managing expectations. In this section, I'm taking you all the way through the steps that WIDA is giving us. And there's some really important things that we're going to highlight, and that I'd like to make sure we get through that, and I think we can. And those are specifically the key language uses. So if you look in the materials that come from the WIDA 2020 Standards Framework, you're going to see this section that talks about the steps and the guiding questions. Now, this is all accompanied by an actual model that's in that section. So I do encourage you to make sure you together read and discuss how the 2 teachers in the model pull all of this together for their unit. But in this case, we are going to start with the standards, the English Language Arts standards, and find then the key language use that fits under that. Then, like I said, we've developed the language expectations and unpacked those functions and features. There are only 4 key language uses: narrate, inform, explain, and argue. And so whatever you choose of those 4 is going to be good enough. Some are clearly stated, like we know that the students have to create an explanation, the standard says it, then we know we're going to get here to explain. But if ever you're concerned, just know that if you're picking one of these 4, WIDA's research has already narrowed us down to these targets. And so you are still serving students in that integration of language and content. You're still supporting their academic language acquisition while they learn your standards. So I don't want you to be too worried about this. It's not that you're going wrong. There's not that it's easy to go wrong here. There might just be more targeted key language uses for you to choose from. So that said, the more you do it, I think the easier it's going to be to start parsing those out and figuring out which one really works for your content. In 2nd and 3rd grade ELA, I think we're going to wind up here quite a lot between narrate and inform. In fact, you're going to do, as I understand it, a nice unit on literature and then on information text. And so I really think that this is where you'll wind up. So when we start looking at these resources, you're going to have some pages from the WIDA 2020 standards that fit exactly your grade levels. So there's a whole grade band for 2-3. This one here in the model is 4-5, but you'll have for 2-3 that fits what you're doing, and another one for 6-8. So if you're the middle school teachers, you'll have specifically your grade levels. Here it says WIDA Standard 5, Language for Social Studies, but you'll be looking at WIDA Standard 2, Language for Language Arts. And here we can see one of those 4 key language uses. This one is argue. Like I said, you might really be sticking with narrate or inform. And you might go into explain as well. So the way this is laid out is the language expectation really starts above this shaded in box. So the language expectation starts with the words multilingual learners will. So it's a lot like an I can statement or a SWABOT statement. Students will be able to. So in that case, multilingual learners will. And it concludes with one of these two statements, which says, interpret language arts. This says social studies, but yours would say interpret language arts narratives by, or construct language arts narratives that. So it's about the using this word in that statement, and it's interpret or construct. So we're either interpreting or expressing these language use genres. So this is about the language that we're asking students to kind of read and understand, or produce for others to understand. Now, some other tips and tricks I want to show you. You notice here in the colored box, the shaded box here, we have bullets, and these bullets are actually round bullets. So notice that this is a round shape. And down here we have square bullets, and notice that this is a square shape. So WIDA is very specific about the cues that they use with colors and shapes. And so that's very specific. So everything here that's shaded is a part of the language expectation, and then the bullets become these language functions. And these language functions are those patterns of language use. Now, it's really important to notice that here they're in the shaded box, and then down here when they repeat, and it's the same thing. For example, this says introduce a topic. This says introduce a topic, so it's repeated, and it's also shaded in the same color. So this is still here in the brown bullet points, or here shaded. This is still the language function. Then when you get down here to the square bullets, this is where we get to the language features. And I want to just say that the language features is where maybe the content expert like steps back and the language expert steps forward. Now, specifically down here at language features, I anticipate that happening, and perhaps even one level up at language functions. That's what happens. So just a quick caveat, ESL teachers and the ESL teachers for RISE-L are just now beginning to work with these WIDA 2020 standards as well. They have not been available until just recently, and so this is sort of one of our first chances to get involved with that. So if, like I said before, if we get in the weeds here with language features, let's just let that go for a minute and take a step back and really focus on those language functions. Okay, so take a minute to get into your very specific materials. So on the Canvas page, you will see access to the specific grade level materials, narrowed down to language arts, and see how those connect, and maybe even take some time to print them out and highlight which pieces of this really connect to what you think you're going to be teaching with the materials that are given to you. And so this is a chance for you to work together collaboratively with your RISE-L teaching partner, and see how these resources can support that integration of content and language. I'll just say that this is the area where I expect quite a lot of questions. And so even though I'm not with you while you're training this week, I anticipate being very available to you via email or text. So go ahead and contact me with your questions. One thing I can do is, as I get questions, I can send back like video responses or email responses to everybody, so that the questions are being answered with this cohort of RISE-L teachers. So that sort of leads us to concluding our entire training section. So remember, we started at the beginning with your content and language objectives. So I'm asking you now, based on this training, do you feel now that you, as with your collaborative partner, can integrate this language and content by building on what each of you knows and what the learners are bringing and their assets for teaching and learning? And also, can you synthesize and share information from a variety of curriculum and language scaffolding resources to design and deliver multimodal learning opportunities within this language-rich RISE-L classroom environment? And I hope the answer is yes. And I hope that some of those resources that we're synthesizing include the English language arts materials that are provided for you by the RISE program for English language arts, and these WIDA resources that I'm providing for you on this Canvas page. So Like I said, I expect you to stay in touch. So you have here my direct text line. This is my Google Voice that I use for all my teachers. So before you call me, maybe text me with your name and which classroom you're with, or who your partner is, some basic information, because then I'll save your name and number and then I'll take your call. So I do screen calls if I don't have you in my contact list, and then you'll go to voicemail and I'll have to return a call. From whatever phone that you're at in your classroom, you should be able to pick up the phone and dial this extension and it'll go straight to my desk phone. That's great, except that I've got my desk phone forwarded to my Google Voice phone. So go ahead and just call me here or text me here. Also send me an email, and we have some extra resources available for you on our Canvas page. I have been quoting directly from these resources, so I wanted to give you these references so that you can see that we're really focusing on the research from Dove and Honigsfeld, and from two very specific WIDA resources, the 2020 Standards Framework and the Collaboration Focus Bulletin. I look forward to continuing to work with you, and even though I'm not with you this week, I will be with you throughout the 5 weeks of the RISE L Collaborative Classrooms. So do stay in touch, and I hope you have an excellent experience with summer this year.